Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Pipefy webinar today, Competing for Talent in a Digitized World, Why HR Teams are Upleveling Their Recruiting Process Strategy. And I'll just give a quick intro of myself. I'm Pipefy's product evangelist. I'm somewhat new to the company. I've been here for just a few months, but I have a long background working with work management and project portfolio management software. I've been in the SaaS software space for longer than I care to admit. And I'm really excited about this topic today because I know that there are a lot of folks out there who are challenged with some of the challenges that we see in the recruiting marketplace today. And we're going to talk through a couple of those and actually also talk about some solutions for them. So we'll go ahead and get started. Quick agenda. We are going to just do a quick intro on recruiting, some drivers, challenges, and some technology solutions around those. Then I'll be really excited to introduce my panel discussing recruiting's real-world example challenges and solutions. We will have you guys not on Q&A until we get to the end of the discussion, so feel free to put questions into the chat or the Q&A panel throughout, and then we will have time dedicated for a Q&A with open discussion with our panelists. I have just a quick intro of who Pipefy is and why we're hosting this webinar, so you can just get a little bit of information about who we are. And of course, we really appreciate you attending, and we have information about our next webinar that will kind of give you a deeper dive into our capabilities. So let's go ahead and get started and talk about kind of recruiting, market drivers, and technology in recruiting. So some of the things we're seeing today is this big quote, which I actually really loved. It's a candidate's market, and are you ready to compete? So according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, turnover is on the rise. I think everybody's heard about that this year. It's something like 40 to 50% of the workforce is potentially going to be looking for new jobs this year in the United States. Unemployment is down, which means there's a smaller talent pool, and competition is steadily increasing. So what is that kind of causing in terms of drivers that need to happen within organizations? There's a greater emphasis on providing an excellent candidate experience. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. But ultimately, and this isn't really just for candidates, it's also for employees, for any HR generalists out there as well. But just thinking about kind of response time and general quality experience in terms of communication, how that whole technology experience is for the candidate as they're looking at your organization, kind of perusing the job openings and things of that nature. And then what's their experience in terms of timeliness for getting back to them, going through the interview, and then the offer experience as well. So there's just a lot that can happen within that process, and just providing kind of really, really, really top quality experience for the candidate is going to make your organization more competitive in a good way. And then really, as you have this challenge within the talent pool, is making sure you get the right people within the job. So assessing skills and competencies becomes kind of even more important as part of this process. And so just thinking about how you can do that as part of the process with data gathering, and then ensuring you might have assessments that you want to send out and things of that nature. So a lot more emphasis on information that you're gathering as part of the process for these candidates, and then matching them appropriately to the open requisitions. And then really just thinking about how you can use analytics to drive better decision-making. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how analytics can drive, what some of the metrics are that analytics can drive, but just thinking about where you have better acceptance rates, where in the market are you finding better candidates in terms of geography or schools or things of that nature. So just using analytics to kind of help this continuous improvement practice to make the overall experience better for both your recruiting and talent acquisition teams, as well as your candidates. And then one of the ways that you can improve this experience and kind of get the analytics and assess the skills and competencies is through technology. So thinking about why it's important to apply technology to this candidate and employee experience. And so there's a couple of statistics here I'll just highlight, is that recruitment teams are saying that the best way to improve their overall recruitment performance is by investing in new recruiting technology. And then not hiring the right people is costing your organization's money. And then lastly, just using process automation to make recruitment more efficient. So that way your recruitment teams can spend less time coordinating information and focus on identifying the best candidates to strengthen your business. Just thinking generally, there's kind of a few big areas here is just thinking about when you apply that technology, some of the big benefits are, of course, process efficiency, so time savings, removal of human bias, and that's becoming really important as well in this world of diversity and inclusion, and then just being able to find the right people. So thinking about using technology for those skill assessments and kind of the candidate match. And then lastly, just what every organization is always trying to do is do things as efficiently and productively as possible and saving money across the bottom line. And then what the application of this technology, kind of measuring the results. So what can you measure as part of the overall metrics and analytics that bringing this technology into your organization will bear for you? So thinking about measuring the amount of time it takes to fill and hire for open positions, and with the application of technology and those measurements, you can actually reduce that time. Sorry, my clicking is a little slow here. Increasing your overall offer acceptance rate. So just improving that candidate experience with, again, reducing the time, improved service, improved communication, more efficiency. It's just getting those candidates in the door, right? So making it overall a more efficient process from an overall recruitment and hiring perspective. Reducing the cost per hire and your vacancy cost. So how long are positions staying open? And then how much is that overall process costing the organization? So we saw that number of 17,000 per candidate is you can really think about what these costs are. And if you can streamline and measure the overall activity within the recruiting process, just how much you can improve that performance and reduce the overall cost within this process. And lastly, we have one more, just improving overall the quality of your hiring and as well as your diversity. So thinking again about the skill and competency alignment, the diversity, just ability to track that overall data. And so having that technology and the analytics behind the scenes to be able to drive and support you during this process is going to also increase the quality of your hiring and help with your diversity initiatives. So that was just a little bit of background, just thinking about kind of what's going on in the market within recruiting today. So now I'm very excited to introduce the next part of our webinar today, which is our panel discussion. So we actually have two fabulous panelists today that I'm excited to have joining us. Cheryl Marymont is currently head of people and talent at a stealth startup and driving the talent strategy to take this company out of stealth. So they're in growth mode. Cheryl has 15 years of experience in recruiting and HR. So we'll be talking a lot about recruiting and talent acquisition, but Cheryl will also be adding some general HR information as well today. And she's worked at large organizations, smaller organizations, and even her own consultancy business, Cherry Top Talent. So you can see quite a lot of experience there and brings a great depth and breadth to our conversation today. Selena, we are thrilled to have as our head of talent, a lead of talent and employer branding at Pipefy, and also has a ton of experience at larger and smaller organizations and specializes in full cycle recruiting, programs and events, and helping companies scale and hit growth targets. So Selena is an excellent business partner with our business leaders to kind of grow our organization actively today. And I'm excited to have both of you. So welcome to Cheryl and Selena. And we are going to go ahead and move into our first question.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to start with Cheryl. I talked about some trends and challenges that I've kind of researched and seen in the marketplace and talking to many of our customers and prospects, but I'll throw this question out to you. What are some of the challenges you are seeing generally in recruiting today? So let's start with recruiting and then we can maybe move to HR a little bit later.
Sure. So I think the first thing you actually touched on already is regarding the current talent market or the talent pool. People are totally either happy and don't want to move, or they want to move, but they also want to be remote, or there's all kinds of different things that I think are challenges when it comes to recruiting. But in particular, it's a highly competitive market. That's just number one. I would say I mentioned the demand for remote work, and also I would say remote first, and then I think companies are trying to figure out, like, how do we do this effectively in like a hybrid way? How do we get our employees back to work? So I think that is also something that is challenging, because people will want a remote environment, and those companies that are trying to recruit right now that are not remote are seeing big challenges in those areas. And I would say, let's see, other challenges in recruiting. Well, there are so
actually have a follow on to something you said, and it's something I came across in my research. I saw that some companies are leaning towards a geography based income or salary. And so for remote employees, they're wanting to offer lower base salaries than in person, or geographically, if you live in a lower cost place. I'm not going to judge any part of the country versus a higher cost of living place, that there's some discrepancy in salary. So is that something that you've seen as well?
It's something I have seen. It's interesting. In the current role, what we try to practice, or what I'm currently trying to do, is keep everybody equal and whole and the same. And we do it kind of based on where our, I guess, where our headquarters is, which is in California. Even though we are remote, we still have like a home base in California,
Sure.
Northern California. And so we base our personally, we're basing all of our compensation in California, right? No matter where our employees are, because that also helps us stay competitive. Now, my finance partners, I'm sure, disagree with me on this strategy. So you see a lot of internal struggle when it comes to that, but ultimately you want to do what's best for the people, and ensure that, you know, they're comfortable and really happy coming to work. So if you can stay competitive, if that works for your company, that's what, you know, if you can do it. If you can't, it is a challenge. Yeah, because people that are moving out or going to different geo-based locations, I think they're used to making a certain amount, and then they, you know, the impact is large to them when they, you know, move out of state and don't still make that same amount.
Sure. Absolutely.
So even, you know, there's so many interesting things I could say about that, but I think that's where I'll stop.
I wonder though, so thinking about, and Selena, I'm sorry, we're going to let you give some insight into this as well, but if you think about companies that are based, and a lot of companies are based in higher cost of living areas, like just let's say San Francisco and New York as two examples, but now folks are realizing they don't have to live in those higher cost of living places anymore, but they do want to make the same amount of money. It seems a little unfair if they're moving to a lower cost of living place where salaries are at that level. So I don't know, I think I would imagine a future adjustment to that, but we're still in the early phases of all of this. But anyway, that's great insight. Thank you, Cheryl. Selena, anything you want to add in terms of some additional challenges you might be seeing today?
Yeah, I mean, not additional. It's the age-old hiring fast. You know, anything that slows us down, time kills all candidates, unfortunately. So, you know, trying to figure out where are those bottlenecks? Do we have inefficiencies that we can correct, or processes that we can automate, like we do so often at Pipefy, where we are able to essentially give back time to the recruiters. The other big challenge, well, not a challenge, but, you know, one way that I try to balance some of these challenges is just try to be as transparent with your hiring process as you possibly can with candidates. They really do appreciate it. I feel like, you know, maybe 10 years ago, there was a little bit more of a dance that would happen. But for me, especially when I'm dealing with candidates, I try to always just let them know as much as possible about how our hiring process is going to go. And then in addition to that, I try to follow up with them pretty frequently, so they're not left in limbo wondering what's next.
Sure. Thank you. That's awesome. And then one follow on for both of you, is there, because the talent pool and it's so competitive, is there a challenge being at a smaller company and hiring? Are you finding candidates more willing, because they're a little bit more on experimental mode because the market's so hot that it's easier to get people coming to a smaller, less known company right now, or harder? I don't know what that trend is, to be honest. So Cheryl, if you want to weigh in on that one first.
Sure. I think that it depends on your environment, is a big factor, because it does allow the smaller, being remote, it does allow the smaller companies to compete in a way that they've not been able to compete with the larger companies before, or like companies that are not remote,
Sure.
or that are hybrid, or it's really so personal. It is all about your own personal decision, and you get to make those choices because your choices are so much larger than they were before. And so it does really, really help an organization that is like fully remote or aligns to your own personal needs, so much more than maybe it used to, where it was really more about the company, and now it's really kind of more about the people of the organization. So I think it's your environment really that is well, in my case, it's definitely helpful in competition. I wouldn't say it's easier. I don't think this role or recruiting is ever easy. But what I do think is that it is always, it does allow for you to have more conversations with people to see if they are more open. And I do think right now people are generally more open to chat, especially if we go from looking at 2020, where people were like, nope, the world is, a mess. And so we're just going to stay where we are right now. Where now people are like, okay, there's hope, and we want to weigh our options and see what we can do.
Excellent.
Yeah, and just to echo that, I think right now a lot of people are in this assessment period where, COVID has forced us to reassess our priorities, and that has a lot to do with, where we work and how we want to work. So there's kind of this, everyone's referring to it as the Great Resignation, right? Where people are leaving the workforce, or not necessarily the workforce, but they're deciding to go back to school. They're changing their career path. They're willing to start at the bottom again. So, to answer your question more directly, I think, a lot of the smaller companies that are fully remote, that have a more flexible work environment and better employee development programs, are actually able to win the talent and compete with some of these big companies. Whereas, a Google or Facebook had a lot of appeal for so many reasons, right? You're
Right.
on site, there's 100 different cafes, there's dry cleaning. Those things are just not as, I know, right? They're just not as important to people anymore,
Right.
in terms of being able to, hey, I can go coach my kid's soccer game, and, I can do pickup and still come back and do what I need to do to get my job done. So I'm seeing from, talent, on every level, an increased want and need for flexibility, career development, which often happens much quicker at smaller companies. You just happen to get more opportunity because there's a lot more work to be done.
More exposure. Yeah.
Exactly. So I see it as a huge competitive advantage, actually, for a lot of the companies that are doing culture right. But that's the key. You have to nail the culture.
Yeah.
Right. As Cheryl mentioned as well. Okay, great. All right. Well, now we're going to kind of jump into a little more detail. And Cheryl alluded to this a bit, but recruiting processes. And Selena, I think you hit on this too, just in terms of time. Time is kind of the most critical. But I guess just thinking about the, end-to-end process for recruiting, what are the biggest challenges? And then next, we're going to talk about sort of the biggest opportunities for kind of improvement and optimization. So I don't know who wants to take this one first, but Cheryl, Selena's muted, so I'll call on you.
Okay. I'll start. So one of my biggest challenges with the process in general is all of the systems that I have to use. So I would say, like in a nutshell, systems management and the time that it takes me to manage all of my systems. Some of my systems don't necessarily fully integrate or fully connect or talk to each other as well as I would like them to. And so that creates a challenge for me time-wise, to your point. And I just don't have enough time to manage them all, and putting everything in one place is a huge challenge for me right now, even with all kinds of ATS technology and all kinds of awesome sourcing platforms and all of the different things that I do. It doesn't give me everything. So that is my biggest challenge with the process itself. I would say, I want to say that's definitely, and of course, clean data, right? Because I'm going to the data for everything. So I'll talk more about that later. I'll go into more depth probably, but I think that gives you a high level overview of what's my personal biggest challenge in the recruiting process itself.
Great, thanks. Selena?
Yeah, I think one of the key issues that comes up time and time again, no matter what systems people are using, is not tracking or enough visibility into the metrics that matter. So often we're tracking certain metrics, but not other metrics. For example, sourcing. I love looking at sourcing data because it essentially directs where you should be spending your time. Conversion ratios, right? So understanding not just, okay, how many applicants are we getting from any given source, but what's the quality of those applicants? You know, what is our conversion ratio from applicant to first interview? What's that conversion ratio when you look at applicant to, you know, final round or even higher, to really understand, okay, where are we going to put the budget? How are we going to get this ROI? And then we can be really strategic about crafting the right programs, you know, job postings, and other things that will attract the right candidates. So, you know, again, it all boils down to time for me and saving as much time as possible, which again goes back to making sure that we're focused on the right sources.
Okay, great, awesome. All right, moving to the next one. How can we improve these things? So, Selena, I think you hit on it potentially already with metrics and measuring. So thinking about as you need, as the pressures are on to get out to that talent pool and to hire fast, thinking about, you just mentioned a few, your conversion ratio was a big one of like how long it's, what your conversion ratio is to get to interview, to final round, and then to hire, and then saving time. So with regards to time savings, what are some manual things that you do today that could potentially be automated?
That's a great question. I mean, one of the big things, and I think the first things that a lot of people, you know, have automated are some of those automated responses for candidates when they apply or potentially rejection. Of course, you do have to be careful with that in terms of humanizing, you know, especially when you're rejecting a candidate, depending which stage. Typically, if somebody comes through my interview process, you know, currently right now at Pipefy, the volume on the US side of the house for hiring is not too crazy. So people typically get a call from me. And if they're getting an email, it is very personalized and, you know, gives them a lot of information to help them to grow. And of course, lets them know, you know, I'm happy to chat through any of it as well. But to get back to, you know, what kind of things can you automate? I think the process, like rec approvals, that can take a lot of time, you know, getting that final comp approval. Sometimes you have a comp range, but if something goes outside of that range, or stock approvals are a big one that comes into play as well. But, you know, one of the other big ones that we more recently implemented at Pipefy specifically is offer letter automation. This was huge for so many reasons. One, obviously it's time consuming, you know, you have to fill out tedious little numbers here, there, and everywhere, start dates, things that change, you know, but also because error reduction, you know, we're all human, you know, things can change quickly, you're negotiating. And so, you know, just being able to have a form that you fill out, it's very specific, it's very easy. And then, you know, with the click of a button, out goes the offer. It really did speed things up in terms of getting that offer letter out to the candidate. And again, making sure, you know, there's no errors, legal's happy, I'm happy, and the candidate's happy.
That's awesome. Thank you. Cheryl, anything to add?
Sure. And yeah, that was great. I was going to say approval process, but you totally covered that.
Sorry, Cheryl.
No, that's totally great. I think document management as well, like offer letters or NDAs in our case, and just managing everything. I think tracking, again, more tracking. There's always improvement for getting the right data, I think, in these processes. Working with everyone. So making sure that really you're getting the timely responses that you need and everything's collected in the same place. So not only like engaging with your hiring leaders, but every single person that touches that interview process, both internally and externally. And I think setting the right expectations for anyone that is touching your company as well. So that it's interesting because I do use automation, but it's a highly personalized like I give everyone exactly what to expect in the process and when they would hear from me and what, it's very connected. So I do use
Sure.
automation on that front end, but I do it in a way that I'm hoping anyway that is, much more personalized. So there's so many different things that, can save us time, I think, in this process. And I just think there's a lot of area for improvement. I think I would love to see some sort of scheduling that really gets it right. If you have a product out there, let me know that really can connect everyone's schedule. I think that is one of I think on the interview, like the internal processes and how we coordinate, that's an area where I think there's a great opportunity for improvement. I just don't know how to do it yet. I don't think anybody does. If you do, let me know. And yeah, and I think ultimately faster response, right? Allowing us to connect faster is the key.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Have you implemented any process improvements that have had positive impact or positive results on your overall recruiting outcomes? So I don't know, Selena, if you've used metrics already today to kind of help on a continuous improvement journey, or if you guys have any thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm huge on sourcing data. That's like one of my favorite things, because if you don't know where your hires are coming from, how do you know where to spend your time? For us at Pipefy, we're lucky. The bulk of our hiring has been through referrals, of course, passive candidate sourcing, and then a very, very small percentage is just applying online. So in terms of what I'm looking at, often it's, understanding the quality of the candidates coming in by source, and then adjusting the recruiting strategy accordingly and where I focus my time.
Anything to add, Cheryl?
Sure. I was going to say, just to kind of talk more about that, or the data again, or capturing the right data. This is critical, I think, in building effective processes. It helps me truly understand all the data, right? In the systems that I use, it helps me to really tell my story. So the data allows me to build my budget. It allows me to build out my programs. It allows me to do everything, right? But if the process is broken, then my data is not good. And so that creates lots of problems. So I would say, yikes to that, not good, right? So these are things where it's really critical to have clean data, so that you can truly build your internal, external, all kinds of programs, and really help your overall strategy. It really does start with understanding. And if you don't have it, just start building the data and then being able to use that. That's how I do work more from like a bottoms up type of like building strategy, because it's really important to understand the numbers, and that's why I work with finance so well.
You had another comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
We also utilize Pipefy for employee onboarding, which has made life so much easier, just in terms of having the form, kicking off the process with IT, making sure that we collect, t-shirt size. Do you want a Mac or a PC? What kind of equipment do you need? Making sure that people feel welcome on their first day, they know where to go. A lot of that process is actually automated, but automated, again, to Cheryl's point, in a way that's very, very specific, very personalized. And, it still feels like there's a human helping you out. But that's really helped us to coordinate within teams, both with finance, IT, HR, and of course, myself as well on both the recruiting and the HR side of the house.
Awesome. And then Cheryl, I think we had talked a little bit about SOC 2 compliance as part of the process as well.
So critical. So for SaaS companies, obviously SOC 2 compliance is a very hot topic these days, and creating these types of really solid, well-defined processes and being able to automate them will be so helpful for anyone who's working on a SOC 2 compliance, not just for your initial piece of the process, in my experience, but also for maintaining your compliance, right? So being able to prove your process process is critical to SOC 2. And being able to do that over time just helps you create trust with your customers and both internal and your internal, employees, and making sure everything is truly secure and safe. And then, making sure that that's the same way for your customers, right? So I think it's a critical piece of importance that I think is people are becoming more and more aware about, is, the high importance of process, refinement and process, like solid process, but then also as much automation as possible, because that is, truly helpful.
And for those of you who don't know, and this is my high level understanding of SOC 2, first you define and have to identify all of the processes that you manage as the beginning. And then when you go through your attestation, you have to prove and show that you can measure and that you're following the process, right? Did I kind of get that at a high level?
Policy, and then processes, and then and then proving.
Right. Okay, great. All right. Thank you guys. Moving on to the next one. Let's see. I think someone alluded to this already, but if you already have ATS technology in place, what around that is can benefit from process improvement and might just also improve the experience for the candidate. So Cheryl, I'll let you go first on this one. I think you've mentioned a couple already, but any more to add?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about, or Selena did, around employee onboarding. I think great that you have an ATS in place, but additional processes that support onboarding, offboarding, your entire candidate experience as well. It's not necessarily tracked in your ATS, so understanding, how you did with the people that you hired, and what your return on investment is there too. I think processes around that as well are critical, and these can definitely benefit from improvement today. I think, employee programs in general as well. This is really, really helpful. Things like in new grads or interns that may not go through the same workflow that you may have in place in your ATS, or there's something different that you have to create. There's an area for improvement as well for just different things. And so not only on the hiring side, but also post-hire in particular in those types of programs.
Excellent. Thanks. Selena, anything to add?
I think I touched on this a bit earlier, but in addition to employee onboarding, of course, employee offboarding, as Cheryl mentioned, any kind of program that you're running, from referral programs, internship programs, it could be a specific program for engineers or women, people of color, et cetera. I think it's really useful to have Pipefy to help you to drive a better process and, collaborate with multiple teams and just be efficient.
Awesome. Thank you. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep us moving here. So I had to ask, I just had to, in the age of COVID. So just in addition to all of the kind of pressures and drivers and challenges that we have talked about, maybe we can talk about, challenges COVID is placing specifically in the US, because I know both of you work there, for talent and HR teams. I think the competitive market, the remote working, those are probably somewhat related to COVID, but anything else that you guys want to add?
Well, I think connectivity. How are you, this is one of my biggest challenges right now. I actually have a global remote workforce. I think you all do too. And so when
Indeed.
right. And so it's truly figuring out for me is how do I best connect everybody when I can't necessarily get everybody in person, right? I think in the future, what I want to do, even in the global remote environment, is be able to connect people in person, as we, kind of come out of COVID, not in maybe a working environment on the day-to-day or anything like that, but certainly event related, like planning events or, and we will get together, on a global level. And I think the money that we save in facilities management, we can apply to people and getting together and that kind of thing. But these are some of the challenges that I face today, is true connectivity with teams and how to do that in a really creative way that really is meaningful to people. That is definitely one of my biggest challenges in this current COVID environment.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Creating an inclusive culture, around both people who are working remote, people who eventually want to go back into the office, whether it's 1-2 days a week, making sure that nobody's feeling like they're a different class of employee. And that's a hard challenge, right? I think in addition to that, of course, top of mind for everybody, mental health, making sure that you have some kind of health and wellness program for your employees, that you check in with them, that we, understand what's important to them, both in terms of their career development, but also on a personal level, because those things are intertwined right now.
Sure.
The boundaries, as you would say, between work life and home life with remote work are very much blurred. So really making sure that you have a flexible, inclusive, authentic work environment and culture, I think, is paramount for everybody who's out there looking.
And I'll just do a quick plug. I think Pipefy does a great job of all of that. So, so come work at Pipefy if you can, if you want.
Yeah.
All right. So last question, anything else either of you would like to share just within talent acquisition, recruiting, and then Cheryl, HR in general? So Cheryl, I'll let you take this one first.
Sure. I think, let's see, share about challenges. I'm just reading the question. Okay, so I do think that there's a lot of room for improvement in general. I think integrations are awesome, and the more connected everything is, the better, or the less time I spend, doing stuff. But, but of course there are still challenges in all of that today, right? So, I really look forward to awesome technology that's going to solve all my problems and save the day for me. If you have a product in beta or alpha for those smaller companies, I'm really happy to test it. So please send your products my way. I'm always looking for, for great ways to automate. And this is really important. I think on the HR side, that's more like kind of, I guess, process improvement in general. But when it comes to HR, process improvement, again, I just kind of think there has to be a way to do more humanized automation, right? Like there are more touch points, but also in a way that works. I guess we already talked about that too, but these are just areas that I think there's always room for process improvement.
I'm going to do a follow-up to that. We had it as a question come in anyway, but on the integration side, so what integrations would you be looking for, and kind of what data? You talked about clean data and dual entry of data. What would be kind of your top ones for integration, and then what data would you be managing?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to integrations, one of the challenges I face right now is I use a newer to market ATS system. It's really awesome technology, but it's because it's an up and comer, it doesn't have all the integrations that I actually need it to have right now. So that's challenging because it doesn't necessarily connect with my HRIS system right now at all. And so I can't move, a candidate all the way through the actual process into like hire right now at all. It's two very separate systems. So that would be very helpful for me integration wise, like to have that connectivity. Now I know a lot of them do already, so I know it's coming. It's not something that isn't quite there yet. It's just not fully baked yet for me personally at this particular moment. So that would be helpful. Some of my sourcing platforms, they also have integrations, but also I use some newer technologies that don't also integrate with my ATS because it's so new. So there are areas I think that are challenges for me personally in that space when it comes to integrations. Managing the data, I just want to be able to look at everything and have it all. If it's automated, then no one's touching it, right? So that means it's real or it's the source of truth that's coming in and no one's messing with it. So I can totally see the right or like the clean data. So that's what I'd be looking for. And that's what I don't have today. It's like it's not automated. So it can't possibly be like exact.
Got it. Selena, anything to add?
No, I mean, I think, at the end of the day, the process improvements, again, save recruiters a lot of time and hiring teams. And, that's the name of the game, especially right now in such a competitive talent market where, I'm looking at candidates that have multiple offers. We're having to speed people through the process because they have an offer coming or they're in the final round. In terms of reach outs, having, an inbox in your InMail and LinkedIn full of, recruiter requests,
Right.
so I think with the competitive market, it's just so important that, we're able to act in a timely way. And we can't do that if we don't automate as much as possible, and have a streamlined process that we can work from.
Sure, absolutely. Awesome. Okay, one more question, and then I'm going to move to wrap up. So just high level for folks in recruiting and talent acquisition HR, what other departments do you work with? And is there any kind of overlap in terms of data and process? And I think we touched on one for onboarding and offboarding would probably be IT. So that'd be a big one. Any others that you can think of that you would add?
Finance.
Yes, definitely finance.
100%. That partnership with finance is like so critical. Because I also depend on finance to build me, models that I can, kind of map to. And it's just, to me, if we're able to really understand the bottom line, then we're really able to, work toward that. So that's really helpful.
So if you were driving process automation for data, would you be driving that to your finance team, or would they be driving that to you?
Well, both. I drive to them, they drive to me. It's really, it's totally a partnership. They want to know, what am I doing? And then they want to hold me accountable to it, of course.
Got it. Okay, great. Selena, anything to add?
No, I totally agree. I mean, finance, I'm working with on a daily basis, whether it's, approving comp, working within our stock offering for candidates, or even, our perks and benefits that we're getting approved.
Sure.
Right now, we just went through a revamp of perks and benefits. So for that as well.
Great. Awesome. Thanks. All right. Well, thank you, lovely ladies, for all of your fabulous answers to my digging questions. I have one little thing I'm going to add just as a plug for folks on the webinar in terms of Pipefy and just thinking about all the topics we talked about today and essentially who is Pipefy. So we're essentially a no-code process orchestration platform. So you heard us talk some about process today, just thinking about being that orchestration platform that can sit between systems like your ATS and HRIS that really just gives you the ability to automate workflows and manage those business processes. In the HR world, you actually, as process owners and kind of process managers, could actually implement this yourself with our help and without the need for IT resources, which is oftentimes pretty critical these days. And that can include all of the processes we talked about today and then some. So we work with HR and talent acquisition teams, as well as other departments within organizations like finance and customer success, sales, marketing, and IT. So just thinking about all of that. So that's who Pipefy is. And thank you guys so much for attending today. I appreciate, again, the time of our fabulous panelists, Cheryl Marymont and Selena Holder. We will be doing a deeper dive into the product for these specific processes within recruiting and talent acquisition next week, and you can sign up on our registration page. So thanks everyone for attending. Thanks so much again to our panelists, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your week. Thanks everybody. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.